in this birth, I can't say about, how far back you want to go, but in this birth, I was born in Los Angeles, Hollywood. And the temple came to Los Angeles when I was a young boy, very young. And it was just a few blocks away from where I lived, my house. And I was a little bit religious, raised in the RC, and I was into it. And but the problem is that I found that it wasn't enough. Not only because the priests didn't have answers to certain questions, but because half of them were not following. That's another reason why we have to be very strict about what we're doing. People notice. So then I started looking at Eastern philosophies, Eastern religions, and particularly Hinduism. I was very drawn to Hinduism from the very start. And eventually I became a vegetarian, and I was practicing yoga, and I was reading many things, including Bhagavad Gita. I read many editions of Bhagavad Gita, but I didn't understand them because they were bogus, frankly. But when I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, everything was clear. Every question answered in the first sitting, practically speaking. So I was extremely attracted by that. And then I came to visit the temple because we used to see them all the time as kids. These Hare Krishna people, we knew they were there. We didn't know what it was, but we knew this is some religious Hindu thing. So I went there, and when I came to the temple, I saw that the things that I had been reading about, there's a whole society of people who are actually doing it. And I thought, well, my God, this is refreshing. So gradually I became a little bit, I started to practice, I started to chant. I was chanting 16 rounds following the principles, already a vegetarian. I learned how to cook some things. I bought that Hare Krishna cookbook. It was old, basic stuff. So, all right, so then I'm continuing like this because I was very young, and I was even in high school. One day I went to a private school north of Los Angeles, so I was living away from home already at that age even. And one day I got a phone call from one of the devotees that used to talk to me when I would visit the temple, Mukunda Datta Prabhu. And I don't know how he got my number because I didn't have a phone. It was the school phone. I don't know how I even knew what school I went to, but somehow or other, Paramatma is there. You cannot keep a preacher down. He was determined to make me Krishna conscious. That was his compassion. Somehow or other, he called me up and he said, listen, Prabhupada is coming to Los Angeles in a few weeks. You don't want to miss this because tulayama lavenapi ityadi, 1/11th a second of association with a pure devotee can give you all perfection. We all know these quotes, I hope. And so I was impressed by that. Somehow or other, I took some great pains to actually come to that because the date was not matching with the finish of my school year. So I cheated everyone. I called my parents and said that, they're ending early this year, so just you can come and pick me up on such and such a date, a weekend. And it's like I just moved my stuff out and got in the car and left. And nobody said a thing. It's like when Vasudev broke out of he didn't break out of the Kamsa's prison, the doors just opened automatically and he walked out. Everybody's asleep. So we went home and I started coming to the temple. My parents were a little bit nervous because I was spending a lot of time at the temple. And nobody in America in 1976 or 75 had any idea what is this ISKCON Hare Krishna. They didn't know. They thought it's some kind of tantric cult that we're sacrificing animals or something. They don't know what we're doing. So, they were a little nervous, but in June of 1976, Srila Prabhupada came and stayed about a week there. In those days, everywhere he went, he would stay about 1 week. And as many days as I could get away with, I went to the temple when Prabhupada was there. First time, And I was already, as I said, I was chanting, I was reading Prabhupada's books, I knew something about Krishna consciousness, but I was still new. And anyway, so the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was at the DT greeting at 7 in the morning. And Los Angeles Temple has the altar, and then on the right of the altar is Prabhupada's room, and on the left is the door to the Pujari room, 2 doors. So I was in the back of the temple room, and upstairs, for those of you who have been to Chennai ISKCON, you've seen there's a mezzanine there. I was standing there on one of those things. And so I had a whole view of the whole temple. So the curtains opened on the right side of the altar, not the altar curtains, Prabhupada's curtains. And Srila Prabhupada came out, surrounded by half a dozen tall American sannyasis. Prabhupada was very slight of stature, very small. But he had such a powerful, commanding presence. It just stunned me when I first saw him. And he was effulgent. You can talk to anybody who saw Prabhupada, and they'll all say the same thing. It was like the sun god walked into the room. I mean, it looked, how things look when there's photographic lights on you. That's what Prabhupada was glowing like that. And I thought, oh my God, this person is, obviously he's not from here. He's just had this unearthly demeanor about him. So I was transfixed. I was just stunned. And Prabhupada just walked over to the deities, the curtain opened, and Prabhupada just paid his obeisances. And he took Charanamritam, just ordinary things, but just the way that he did everything was just so, it was mesmerizing. And then he sat down for Guru Puja on his Vyasasana. And I couldn't really get close because you have to consider everyone in the whole movement was initiated by Prabhupada in those days. So if you've got and many people from the western half of the United States would all flock to Los Angeles if he was there. And then everybody would go to Denver if he was there. And everybody would go to Chicago if he was there. He was like he was like a magnet for the devotees. So I couldn't get close to Prabhupada during Guru Puja, and I also didn't know the words to that song. But the kirtan was there, and somehow or other, by the end of that kirtan, I had ended up in the middle of the temple room, such that when Prabhupada sat down on his Vyasasana, I was not that far away from him, about as far as I am from this front row here. So I was very fortunate to see him very closely, but that just entranced me even more than I already was. I knew the song Jai Radha Madhava, simple. But when Prabhupada started singing, I was just so transfixed looking at everything about him. I couldn't even remember the words to the song that I already knew. I was really taken by Srila Prabhupada's extraordinary demeanor. Then he began to speak, and this was 6th canto, because 6th canto had just come out in those days. And this was a Jamila story, and he was talking about the 13 witnesses to all the activities that we perform, how Krishna is monitoring our karma, and how we can't get away. Basically, there's no escape from the authority of the Lord. Frankly, I couldn't understand very much of what Prabhupada said because his Bengali accent was just too much for me. I was that new. And but I got a lot out of the lecture nonetheless just by seeing him. And, I was sitting in front of him for a good, 40 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, maybe an hour even. So, it's unforgettable. I never spoke to him. I never got the chance to render any personal service. I never got any letters or wrote to him at all. Because by that time, this is when I finally joined, it was 76. And they discouraged that because Prabhupada was so busy and ISKCON had become so big, they didn't want everybody and anybody and everybody just to write Prabhupada. So I stayed a little bit sakuchita, we say in Hindi. But I saw him on several occasions during that week in this way. One day I was sitting on the lawn in front of the temple with Shubhananda, the same devotee who invited me, and we were reading the recently published Chaitanya Charitamrita about the activities of Madhavendra Puri. And this devotee, he saw that, because he was facing the temple, I was facing the street. So he saw that there's an outside door to the temple also that comes from Prabhupada's room. There are two doors. One goes into the temple, one goes outside. That door opened up. Again, all this whole crowd of sannyasis and their dandas, they came walking down the steps, and in the middle was Prabhupada, shining again, tiny but powerful. And he slowly, I should say, he descended down the steps, because it didn't seem like he was touching the ground. But that's how otherworldly he was. But the limousine had pulled up. There was an alley there, and the limousine had pulled up, and they opened the door. Prabhupada got in the car. So Shubhananda told me, it's too bad we don't have any flowers. We could offer some flowers. Actually, there were some flowers there, but they were in the garden. They were not. Anyway, I was so immature at that time, I just went and picked the flowers, went right up to Prabhupada's window, and put my arm in front of Prabhupada in the car, and held the flowers for him to take. I don't think I would have that much sahas even now, but I did it. And Prabhupada took the flowers, he smelled the flowers, and he drove away. That was the only personal interaction I ever had. But I should say, the reason I'm so big on Prabhupada's books is because I had already been reading his books. They really made the impression on me that made me want to adopt Krishna consciousness. And in the years since then, they have sustained me ever since. And even though I didn't get Prabhupada's personal association so much, it's okay, because I have enough of this Sambandha Gyan to recognize that the real thing is in the Vani. And I was trained by one of the closest associates of Srila Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna Goswami. Practically any picture you see of Srila Prabhupada, he's going to be right there. So, and he told me that, after Prabhupada had left, he told me that although we say that the Vani is the superior thing because it's eternal, but still, I never lost any opportunity that I could get to have Prabhupada's personal Vapu Sangha. And, it shows. He was very thoroughly trained by Srila Prabhupada, and most of my training came from him, because I joined Radha Damodar after that. After Prabhupada departed LA, he went to New York. Famous things he did and said there, 76. And meanwhile, I was, there were two classes of devotees in the temple, and some of them were saying, just join now, and just go on a bus or something, just traveling Sankirtan, nobody will find you, it'll be fine. And others were saying, no, you can't do that. You have to be responsible, you finish school, please your parents. When you're legal age, you can do whatever you want. So which one do you think I chose? As a 15-year-old. Yeah, I chose the hot one. So that was much more appealing to my immature mind. So I joined Radha Damodar party. Now, I didn't actually join Radha Damodar. Actually, I was the left-wing devotees in the temple. They made an arrangement to send me on a midnight flight to New York City from Los Angeles, secret. In the middle of the night, nobody will notice. And we got to New York City on that plane around 7 a.m., just after sunrise. And this is autumn by the time I joined. And it's a little chilly in New York, like this. I only had a t-shirt. That's all I was wearing. And it was a bit cold. And also, I was very young. I didn't even know where is the temple. I had an address in the Bhakti Godhead magazine. In those days, there's no cell phone, there's no AI, nothing, But I had the address in the Bhakti Godhead magazine. In fact, another miracle is this. I didn't even have any pocket change to pay for the bus fare to go to Manhattan. But somehow the driver he didn't care. He took me to Manhattan. I asked him, where can I find this address? He said, I'm not going there, but I'm going close to there. I'm going to the bus terminal. You can stay. So he took me there. And when I got out of the bus terminal, this is called Port Authority in New York. So that terminal is a famous place for, what do you think? Book distribution. So I just walked up to the devotees. Where's the temple? Oh, we're about to cut off. We're going to go there now. You can come with us. So I got to the temple and I said I wanted to join. This is not the first time it happened. First, I tried to join in Los Angeles. When I called my mother and said what I was doing, this is after I visited Rath Yatra, I got so inspired. I said, I told my mother that I'm in the temple, I want to stay here. She was at the temple within 10 minutes. So that plan was foiled. Then once again, this time I got a little bit more adventurous. I figured out how to get a bus ticket to San Diego. And I went to San Diego's about 300 miles from Los Angeles south, right on the Mexican border. So I got out there, and again, I wasn't prepared for anything, no money, nothing. I had enough bus fare, I think, but when I got out, I had the address of the temple, but I had no idea where to turn when I got off the bus. But I'm looking at the address, it's on 3rd Street. So I just walked arbitrarily in any direction. And after a couple of blocks, I saw 3rd Street. And it was a T intersection. If it was Chennai, you would have Pillai there. But I just took the only way I could go. I went onto 3rd Street and I was determined that I'm going to walk the entire length of the street until I find that temple. And that's what I did. I walked several miles. And eventually I came to the place where I saw that the temple, there was a picture in the Back to Godhead magazine, which I had. So I could recognize it. Then I knocked at the door, and who answered the door? Gunagrahi Das Adhikari. He's passed away now. He took sannyas later. But he looked at me, and I told him, I want to surrender to Krishna. A 15-year-old kid. And he just looked at me very carefully, and he said, come inside my office. And we talked for a long time. Evidently, he was satisfied that I was sincere and not crazy and whatever. So he let me join. I was there for about a month until one day there's a knock at the temple door. I just happened to be there because when you're a new bhakta in the temple, they make you clean the temple, right? So somebody knocked at the door, and I opened the door myself. And there's a policeman standing at the door. And he says, you got to move this car. It's illegally parked. And I said, oh, okay, I can find somebody to do that. But then the policeman looked at me and said, how old are you? And I thought, uh-oh. I told him I'm 18. When I was 15, I looked like I was 13. So he said, what? I told him, 17. I was young. So he said, I think you and I need to talk. Yeah, in retrospect, I think it may have been a setup. My parents may have known, and maybe somebody tipped somebody off or something. But anyway, so they took me to the station, and they called my parents, and they were mad. They were really mad. But they sent me back to Los Angeles, and I had a long, uncomfortable talk with my parents after that. And I promised, I'll learn how to drive, and I'll finish going to school, and I'll do all the things that an American teenager is expected to do. And I tried. But after some time, it just became too much. I couldn't stand it. You have to understand, when I was 10 or 11, I told my mother that I wanted to become a Franciscan monk and join a monastery. She didn't take it seriously, but she didn't know how determined I was. I was really serious about it. And so, I satisfied them. And I tried for some time to really deliver on my promises. But then, as I said, the right-wing devotees and the left-wing devotees. So the left-wing devotees got a hold of me and said, look, you can die any time, right? And Prabhupada, how long will he be here? He's not he's getting old, and you got to do something. You should take initiation. If you die without initiation, you may not, all these things. So that's when they made this decision to send me to New York on that plane. So when I got to New York, this is another thing you have to consider, that there was a bunch of lawsuits against ISKCON at this time because many other kids like me were joining. And not all of them were legal age. And the parents were totally upset. And they were saying this cult they're going around brainwashing people and all kinds of things they were saying. During that court case, Prabhupada told the devotees, because the devotees were actually very nervous. During that court case, while that was going on, the temple president, he started thinking and said, wait a minute, we got this kid here in this temple, and we've got, he's got these court cases going on all over ISKCON. He's a hot potato. We got to get rid of him. You understand what is a hot potato? Nobody can hold it. You have to throw it to the next one. So they sent me to what later became, now it's called Gita Nagari. Just, in those days, it was just a nascent farm community, just not even barely off the ground. Just they had a house there and some Panchatattva picture, no deities even. So they sent me there. So then after about a month there, a big bus pulled into the driveway of the temple, Greyhound bus, big, commercial bus. Out from that bus came Tamal Krishna Goswami, Trishajuna Swami, and Guru Kripa Swami, and met several brahmacharis. And so they were on their way south, because in those days, Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party, during the winter was coming, and they wanted to have their annual marathon, Prabhupada marathon, but it's much easier to distribute books when the weather is warm. So they went to the southern part of the United States, kind of like North India, South India, same sort of situation. So after some time they saw me, and Tamal Krishna Goswami actually remembered me because I had met him earlier in Los Angeles. When I wanted to join in Los Angeles, Rameshwar, who was the local authority, and Tamal Krishna Goswami, who was just visiting at that time, they were having an argument between themselves about my fate. Tamal Krishna Goswami was taking the pessimistic side that, look, we've already got so many court cases going on. This boy is a liability. You don't know how serious he is. What's he going to do? Like that. And Rameshwar is on the other hand, he's arguing, no, and this is right in front of me. They're carrying on like this. Rameshwar is saying, no, he's a devotee. He's chanting 16 rounds. He's been coming here for so long. He's serious. So Tamal Krishna Goswami ultimately made the decision, because that was Tamal Krishna Goswami. So he told me that, okay, you come back at noon tomorrow. Sharp, noon. We'll talk about it. Okay, now I'm good. I came back at 11:55. I waited right outside the door until 12 noon. Then I knocked. This is American time. So that somebody answered the door, and they didn't answer the door, they didn't open the door fully, but through the doorway I could see that Tamal Krishna Goswami is sitting across the room behind a low table with a big plate of Mahaprasadam there. And he looks at me and he just shakes his head and said, okay. He said, well, the thing is that now it's time to take prasadam. He made the appointment himself the day before. But he told me, now it's time to take prasadam, and prasadam is Krishna. We cannot keep Krishna waiting. This was Tamal Krishna Goswami. Very, very first-class devotee of prasadam. So he said, why don't you come back tomorrow at such and such a time? He was testing me. Himself. He didn't have faith in Rameshwar, it seemed. So then I did. I came back the next day. Yeah. I don't remember how it worked out, but ultimately I think my parents, because they intervened, nothing came of that. And so then I had to go to San Diego, and then finally went to New York, and from New York, Itanagari, and from there, he got me to join the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party. That's like the subject matter of a whole separate seminar. It's just too much. You can read about it in so many books. Many devotees have written about that. But I should say, since we're talking about how Krishna carries, in spite of our inadequacies or failings, I should say that even though I joined in such an immature state, and even though I, technically speaking, according to American law, I was a runaway, teenage runaway, underage. I could have been arrested and whatever, and I was arrested. Not once. Several times I was arrested for performing Sankirtana without a permit. Because they just, they wanted to harass the devotees because they saw us as a nuisance. But at no point did anyone ever ask me to see my identification. At no point did anyone ever ask me, how old are you? It's like, again, the same thing happened. All the guards fell asleep. Because every day, all day long, I was praying very seriously to Narasimha, don't let me lose this opportunity. So I was on Radha Damodar for some time, and then, the rest is history. But that's how I joined. You wanted to know? It's a kind of a long story. We've taken more time again, just like yesterday. Is that okay? Kshamasvamam. All right, so we should stop here. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.